What started as a question, God, you created marriage, can you make it work? Soon became a statement, God, you created marriage, you can make it work. Thank you for joining us on the Christian Family Life podcast, where we get into the good, the bad, and the ugly in our marriage relationships and mine God's word to see what it has to say about it.
Welcome to the Christian Family Life podcast. That's a broadcast. It's Roland and Tammy today, and we are missing our favorite couple, Gio and Susie. They will not be with us today, but we'll join together again.
So it's just the two of us.
It's just the two of us.
We can make it if we try.
Yeah,
just the two of us.
We can. So we're going to do a part 2 of friendship and marriage, and
Love it.
And we're going to break down a little bit of why friendship goes so quickly in marriage. What could cause that? So we're going to talk about some of those kind of pitfalls that we might fall into.
I love the different aspects of relationship, especially within marriage. It seems like we could have part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5 to whatever topic it is that we're addressing. If it's communication, part 1200, conflict resolution, part 1565. And so especially as it relates to friendship and marriage, that ends up bringing a lot of those things together. Because when you think about the role that friendship plays, we recognize that friendship drives.
Yep.
And what happens when we don't see our spouse as our friend?
Yeah.
I mean, think about when people celebrate each other. And we've heard the phrase, you're not only my lover, but you're my best friend.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that those things go together. It's the fact that we get to share intimacy in so many ways. And the Bible has a lot to say about that. In fact, I'd like to start our conversation today with a phrase that one of the original founders of the ministry would use. I remember when I first heard him share it, and we're talking about Dr. Barry Leventhal. Barry and Mary Leventhal, who played such a significant role in the founding of the ministry. And he was a seminary professor at Southern Evangelical Seminary. And he was the one that for so many years kept Don and Sally and others who were part of the ministry theologically straight. But I remember at a Topgolf event, he said, "Hey, I want to share something."
And this was, just to insert, this was the Topgolf event that right after Don Meredith's diagnosis, and everybody was pretty certain he wasn't going to. This would have been his last Topgolf event, and so I remember there was a lot of their friends, and if it's one thing I would say about Don and Sally was they had a lot of friends, and they were actually good friends as well. They were definitely best friends in their marriage. And so when we think about friendship and marriage, it isn't just for us to be best friends and nobody else is allowed. When you do experience friendship, deep friendship in your marriage, then you do have a capacity. You do invite other people in. Sorry, you go ahead and finish.
No, that is really good. I'm glad you inserted that.
Yeah, there were so many people that came to support, and it was probably one of our best Topgolf events where I feel like he was honored. But anyway, Barry Leventhal, Dr. Barry Leventhal.
Yeah, Barry Leventhal, he came up to me and said, "I really want to share something." Barry Leventhal has since passed away as well. Don passed away in 2022. I believe Barry was either 1 or 2 years after that.
Yeah.
But at that event, he said, "I want to share something." And he read a poem called Sticky Friends. And he expanded on this idea of the kind of friend that Don and Sally were to him and to Mary throughout the years, and the kind of commitment. And the story is really funny because when Barry and Mary Leventhal got married, if I understand correctly, they really didn't have much money to go on a honeymoon.
No, that's right.
And they had
did
such
not.
a close relationship with Don and Sally that Don said, "Here, take my credit card." And so when they check into the hotel for their honeymoon, they were Mr. and Mrs. Meredith.
Yes.
As opposed to who they really were, Mr. and Mrs. Leventhal.
Leventhal.
But he described the idea of a sticky friend. And I love something that Barry Leventhal wrote in a devotional that he did for To Becoming One. It was written in 2003, and it's featured on crosswalk.com. But here's what he wrote. Becoming best friends in marriage means that we must become sticky friends. The word used in Proverbs 18:24, and I'm going to pause here and have you read Proverbs 18:24.
A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. That would be Proverbs 18:24.
And I feel like there's an appropriate pause here as we consider what the wisdom we find there. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Barry goes on to write, the word used in Proverbs 18:24 for sticks is the same word used in Genesis 2:24 for cleaving. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Cleaving or sticking is a commitment to permanency in marriage, to be glued together for life. So, Tam, you can't go anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
We're glued. He finishes by writing, without such a permanent bond, best friendships in marriage will eventually disintegrate. Superficial companionships are the best for which we can hope.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that we all desire that kind of deep connection in marriage where we feel glued together.
Yeah.
Emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Yeah, it's interesting that the word sticks means cleaving. We always kind of, I guess every time we look at Genesis 1, 2, or 3, in the beginning, it's always something that stands out because our two becoming one resource is based on Genesis 1 and 2, before the fall, and what God's original design intent was for marriage. And we don't look at that verse that says, and the two shall become one. They will, leave their mother and father and cleave to their spouse. We don't look at that and say, well, that was before the fall. That was before sin entered. So that doesn't apply anymore. No, that does apply. That does, it becomes definitely harder because we are sinful, but it's moving towards each other instead of away from each other. And I think that we don't have to really even look much into the world to know that you have marriages that are staying together, but they're not cleaving and they're not sticky friends. They are living separate lives. There are some people, we know in Hollywood there's open marriages, and then there's people that stay married, but they go on vacation separately. It's just not, it's not God's design. And so I do think that when we look at what might cause the friendship to go, what is it that makes us withdraw, makes us put a wall between our spouse and us? And so one of the things is insecurity. right? And we'll break that down, but we're going to look at some scriptures in Proverbs that kind of point to friendship.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that when we consider becoming friends in marriage, and as we listen to the podcast, we're thinking to ourselves, okay, how do I cultivate this friendship that God wants us to have in our marriage? And how do we do it from a biblical standpoint? And we understand the framework. God created us in his image and his likeness. And so God exists in Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the unity that exists there is the kind of unity that he desired when he said, I will make man in our image and in our likeness. And he started by creating male and female. And like you said earlier, it's not just about the friendship that we cultivate with one another, but it's even the friendships that ripple out from there. But what happens, and I think that there's great depth to one of the phrases that Barry used in that statement we read, is superficial companionship is the best for which we can hope, without that bond where we seek to be glued and committed to other people. A lot of people, because of what was modeled for them, creates a lot of insecurity in them. And I think that that's one of the things that we want to really hit on in this podcast. And that when we get to the end of it, that we would really consider, how secure are we, first of all, in our relationship with the Lord? And if we're secure in that relationship, then I feel like we can approach marriage with greater vulnerability. Because what insecurity does is it causes us to question whether or not, if I'm really myself, will my spouse really love me? And without even realizing it, insecurity begins to erode marriages over time. And if we'll just go back to that as the root, how secure am I in my relationship with the Lord? Leading to, how secure can I be in my marriage? Because if I'm not secure in my relationship with the Lord, then I'm certainly not going to be secure in my relationship. And chances are that I'm living life with a lot of relationship that are superficial. And so long as we keep people at arm's distance, we can tend to kind of manage. But if we're going to really have a friend that sticks closer than a brother, it's going to mean that there's probably going to be some challenges that you're going to face together. Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. If we're secure in our relationship, when trouble comes, no matter what it is, the first person you turn to is your spouse. But here's what happens. If there's insecurity, and because we've heard this, when insecurity is in the relationship, all of a sudden things happen that kind of cause you to react a certain way. And so one spouse loses their job. We've had couples come to us and go, I can't call my spouse right now because I don't know how they're going to respond to this. If there's friendship in marriage, you hear that and you're thinking, the first person, the first call I make is to my spouse. When there's some kind of financial issues that arise, so here's what insecurity does. Insecurity not only erodes the relationship, but the way that it erodes the relationship is you begin to keep secrets, and you're realizing that you don't have someone that you can stick to in the good and the bad. Proverbs 27:9 says, oil and perfume make the heart glad. So a man's counsel is sweet to his friend. And I can't tell you how many times I've come to Tammy with a heavy heart, with something difficult that I've navigated, and have just said, I just need to share this with you, and we either need to pray together, or I need to know what you think. I want to know what you think, and can you help me navigate this? And then even at times, like Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. And sometimes what I need to hear is not necessarily what I want to hear.
Most of the time, it's not what you want to hear. But that did stand out to me because there are times that I feel like I might want to say something to you that you might not want to hear, or I know that there's often times that you might hesitate telling me something that I don't want to hear. But that's when you've cultivated trust in your marriage. Mm-hmm. And but when we think of faithful are the wounds of a friend. So even if it means I don't like the way you spoke to our son today, I think that you've hurt him, or something like that, something along those lines, or you got frustrated with me today, and I was trying, or whatever. There are different things that come up, and I do think that we should in marriage, you should cultivate that trust and that vulnerability. It's one of those words that's it's difficult lately for me, but you have to have that. You have to be able to share that. And I think sometimes we think, I shouldn't be sharing negative things. We need to have that. There's open lines of communication, because it's not just so that we're making them a better person. Because I think that outwardly, okay, I want you to be a better version of yourself, and so I'm going to help you in this way. But it's also because we're sharpening each other. Mm-hmm. We're encouraging each other. You might be blind to something that you are doing. I might be blind to something, and I feel like I am your confidant, right? I don't need to look. You are mine, so I don't need to look to somebody else to say, "Hey, what did you think about, this talk that I did? What did you think about, whatever, what?" Like, we can ask each other, but I can feel safe and secure that when you tell me something, I need to hear it, and that's faithful. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Mm-hmm. But for me to say, "Oh, you did a great job," and hype you up, and when we really don't mean it, what does the Bible say? What does Proverbs 27:6 say? Those are the kisses of the enemy, mm-hmm. of an enemy. So, but I think that our enemy, Satan, can get in the way of really seeing what we need to see. We are healthy, things grow. When we are growing in the Lord, there are things that we're learning about ourselves or about our spouse. And I know one thing I like to do is always be present when Roland is speaking, whether he's teaching on a Sunday or whether he's speaking anywhere else. I like to hear what he has to say, because I feel like I can, because of the trust we've cultivated, I can speak to maybe something that nobody else would tell him, because that trust isn't cultivated with everybody. Not that you can't outside the marriage. Yes, there's definitely trusted friends that we have, and I'm thankful for them, but nothing like your spouse. And so when you are interacting, I see just about everything you do. Not always. We're together a lot. Let's just say that. So I might hear conversations, and sometimes we're just different personality-wise. So
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Like when you're on the phone, and I feel like it's gone too long where you haven't commented something, and somebody's telling you something, and I think they might have thought that the the phone went dead because you're not responding to anything. There's no uh-huh. There's no, oh yeah. There's no, oh, I understand. Like that's one of the differences that we have. Like I feel like I should coach you into how to have conversations on the phone, but you don't need any coaching.
Thank you.
Clearly. But those are differences that we have. But anyway,
But one of the things you shared is that we have a confidence with each other.
Yeah.
That when those things are shared, I don't feel like you're creating distance between us. I feel like what you're wanting to do is you're wanting closeness. And when you share truth in love. It's interesting in Ephesians, we'll read that phrase, and there's really 3 parts to that that I think speak to establishing friendship and marriage and security in that friendship. And the first part is you speak. So you got to talk.
Yes.
Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so we've got to bring out in each other those words of the things that are in our heart. And I think about in today's day and age, how devices have really sabotaged all friendships, not just friendship and marriage, but the phone or any other similar device becomes the thing that we turn to. And so we don't speak. And so that's just the first part, and we won't belabor the point. But there's a lot to be said in regards to speaking with each other. And then the second part there is truth. We got to be honest. And so I would much rather the faithful wounds of a friend than the syrupy, sweet, potentially insincere compliments that we'll use and not really express how we feel. And then love. Yeah. And then there's a love that drives that. And so we can use the word. So Proverbs 12:25 says that an anxious heart weighs a person down, but a kind word cheers him up. And so it's most likely, at least I know this is the case for me, I hope that it is for you, that as we think about the interactions that you have as a couple, that there would be more positive interaction than negative interactions. When I think about my interactions with Tammy, I don't think about the comment she made about what could have made me a better public speaker. And I don't think about how she would want me to be a little bit more communicative when I'm on a phone call so that people hear that. I think about all the ways that she expresses her love to me, not just in her actions, but even her words. I think about the sweet things that she says to me. I think about the encouraging things that she says to me. I think about her prayers outwardly spoken over me. Those are the kind of interactions that I think about. And because of that, there's security. There are these deposits that have buffered the withdrawal.
Yeah. I have referenced this story before in one of the earlier podcasts, but it always stands out to me as when we think about kind of wasted time that we have wasted. We read a really great quote by Linda Dillow, and they're reflecting on 50 years of marriage. And she goes on to say all the wonderful things that she will never regret. But one of the things she says at the end, but I will regret all the hours we spent fighting, how the time that we have spent not speaking to each other, days. And that just resonated with me because we don't want to have regret, and we want to see each day as a gift. But I thought this was really good in the drama. It's called Our Town. It's a story of a young wife, and she dies at the age of 26. But she's allowed the privilege of reliving an ordinary day of her life. And and whoever it is talking to her says, choose an unimportant day. Choose the least important day in your life, and it will be important enough. She chooses to relive her 12th birthday, but soon she cries, I can't go on. It goes so fast. We don't have time to look at one another. I didn't realize, so all that was going on, and we never noticed. And one of the characters says, yes, that's what it was like to be alive, to move about in a cloud of ignorance, to go up and down, trampling on the feelings of those about you, to spend and waste time as though you had 1,000,000 years, to be always at the mercy of one self-centered passion or another. But it's Emily's question that pierces the heart. Do any human beings ever realize life while they live it? And the answer given is no. We're encouraged in the scriptures not to move about in ignorance, not to waste time as if we had 1,000,000 years, but to realize life is short, and just the wonderful things that we miss out on in our contempt, in our quarrels, in our withdrawing from each other. And believe me, our backstory isn't pretty. We would go days of the silent treatment, and I hated those. I look back and I do regret them, but I don't live in that regret, because I know that where we are now, I'm so thankful for. The Lord is truly redeemed, and He can do the same for you. Are you in that place where you are not communicating with each other, not being intimate with each other? Are you feeling like you don't even know how to go back to what it once was before that great divide?
You know, you mentioned what things would have been like during really the early season of our marriage, where we would say it was good, but there's a lot of what we say today that is inspired by what we wish someone would have shared with us in our early years of marriage.
Yeah.
So this idea of friendship, there are biblical principles that we read that help us establish great friendships. But for whatever reason, we tend to separate marriage from other friendships that we have, and it ought to be the best friendship. We've read several verses, but even in light of what you just shared, and not having regrets and biblical principles driving the interactions that we have and things that we say, I love this verse in Proverbs 17:9. The one who covers an offense promotes love, but whoever repeats the matter separates intimate friends. You have to ask yourself in marriage, is there an issue you keep bringing up? Now, not that we want to contradict ourselves as it relates to communication and speaking truth and love and addressing things, but is there potentially something that you just need to allow love to cover that multitude of sin? Is there something that is taking place in your marriage where you've had the conversation and you feel like it's the kind of thing that we're just going to hold loosely to, or are we going to keep bringing it up and keep bringing it up and repeat the matter as if to continue to drive a wedge? Proverbs 16:28, a perverse person stirs up dissension, and a gossip separates intimate friends. There's so much about what we say, the motivation behind what we say it, but isn't timing something interesting too? Proverbs 25:11, like apples of gold in settings of silver, is a word spoken in right circumstances. Proverbs 15:23, a person finds joy in a fitting answer, and how delightful is a timely word. I just love those passages in Proverbs. I think that they help us cultivate the kind of friendship that we want to have, not only in marriage, but in the relationships we have outside of marriage. So we have just a couple minutes left. And we started off by sharing with you that if we took an introspective look and we had to identify just one thing, and we're not saying that it is this one thing, but if we had to identify one that would kind of help us experience the friendship and marriage that we want, and it would be to overcome the root of insecurity. And if there's insecurity in who you are in Christ and identity there, then it's going to have an effect on insecurities that you're experiencing in marriage. And so here's the things that insecurity does. Insecurity makes us reserved. It basically says, I don't know if I can have this conversation with my spouse. So if there's things that you walk on eggshells, if there's things that you hold back, then there's insecurity there. You're not sure. Insecurity is pretty selfish. Insecurity is only concerned about self-preservation versus the greater good of your marriage. Insecurity withdraws. And these are all the things the enemy wants us to do. He wants us to be in isolation. And insecurity makes our spouse the enemy. And if we're insecure, then we're easily offended.
All right. You want me to share the good news?
And so you share the good news.
So when we're secure, we can release each other, and I can be myself and he can be himself. We're selfless. We can pursue each other and versus withdrawing. We don't see them as the enemy. We see them as our ally. And we are unoffendable. There is nothing that in love that can be spoken to me that would offend me, because he has my best interest at heart. His love for me, I can be secure in that. And so, does it mean that we don't have our moments? Absolutely, we absolutely do. But we know, I think that at this point, we know how to come out of it. We know that we just know how to apply what we've learned. And we're not going back to the old ways, are we?
No.
By God's grace, right?
By God's grace. And just as we wind things down in just this little bit of time that we have left, is as you take out that root of insecurity and you find yourself secure in the relationship, that, as Tammy said, you feel released. There's a comfort level. You have the best interest of the other person in mind. You are pursuing that person. You see them as their ally, as your ally. You're a team. You work together. That you're not going to be easily offended. It can really be boiled down to this: are you experiencing frustration in your marriage, or are you really experiencing friendship? And friendship is what you want to move to. So we want to leave you with maybe a couple discussion starters, some questions that you could use to begin to unpack establishing a closer relationship in your marriage. One would be, what was modeled for you in regards to friendship? Did your parents have a lot of friends? Was there depth of that relationship? What were friendships like for you? So what was modeled for you? Mom and dad, aunts and uncles. What kind of friendships did you have? And so just begin by learning where your spouse did experience closeness and friendship, if at all. They might say to you, you know what? I never felt understood. I never really felt accepted. Well, all of a sudden you got to lean in, because those are clues as to why there's potential insecurity and you're not experiencing closeness. And then another question would be, well, what do you desire from our friendship? What do you want our friendship to look like? What would ensure that whether something is good or something is bad, that I would be the first person you want to call? That I would be the person that when things aren't going the way you want, you would find such comfort in just being together.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, though, we talk about what we say, it's also about just being. And sometimes in friendship, it's just being together. Way before FaceTime, way before text messages, way before cell phones, frankly. Tammy and I dated long distance, and we would get on the phone.
It wasn't that long. It was just 2 hours, but that's okay.
Yeah. But sometimes in those 2
We weren't in
hours,
the
we
same
didn't.
city.
We were. Yeah. But sometimes, 2 hours away. Yeah, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't in the same city.
That's right.
And so it was long distance phone conversation. We had different area codes. And so we had to pay per minute for
right.
those calls. And it wasn't like we sat there and thought, well, we got to say something because we're paying for these minutes. Sometimes it was just, hey, nothing is more important right now than holding this phone to my ear, just knowing that you're on the other end of it.
Mm. Yep.
So cultivate that friendship with your marriage. Don't be so easily offendable. And it really begins with, you know what? Here's the last question I would leave. Do you feel secure in your relationship with Jesus? And then describe that. Why do you feel secure in your relationship with Jesus? Tammy, why do you feel secure? Putting you on the spot. Why do you feel secure in your relationship with Jesus?
I feel secure because I'm loved. I feel loved by him. I feel accepted by him. And he's shown me that since I was 9. Just his presence. Those moments, those quiet moments that he speaks to my heart, and I read in his word, and it never grows old. It's God's love letter to us. Mm-hmm. And I just think that just the more I know, the more I learn about God's love, his abounding love, steadfast love. It gives us the capacity to love when we feel, at the foundationally, when we feel loved by the Lord, when we feel accepted, all of the things that he says about us, we're secure. We are secure in him. Mm-hmm. And
well, I hope that you feel that love and that acceptance from me. And that as we cultivate our friendship, that we would continually be able to go back to the God who loves us unconditionally, fully knows us and fully loves us. And like you said, gives us the capacity to tangibly experience that here. Well, thank you. And we'd call you friend. Thanks for tuning in and sharing a few moments with us, experiencing what marriage should be based on God's biblical blueprint in his word. Hey, until next time, we look forward to having our co-host Gio and Susie back with us. Yes. And just love these conversations that we get to have every week. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Christian Family Life Podcast. Be sure to subscribe. To learn more about the ministry, visit our website at christianfamilylife.com. There you can subscribe to our newsletter and find all the social media links where we offer resources to help strengthen your marriage. Until next time, remember, God created marriage. He can make it work.